Yeah, good morning, everybody. We are live Thursday morning, and it is Phumelele Mashiro who is in her office. She says she's not going to infect anybody. Phumi was worried that she's got something, and these days, before you know it, you'll be put in a hazmat suit and you'll be dragged off to some camp where you won't be allowed to talk to anybody. So you just got to be careful, right, Pums?
Listen, do you understand the funny looks you get? Just a little nasally, a little sneezing every now and again. People are looking at you like you've got the plague.
That's about right. That's about right. Yeah.
So I just keep myself out of those situations rather than like have my self-esteem hammered by the fact that I'm now just like, why are people looking at me like this?
Yeah, no, exactly. And you can't take a chance these days. It's too ostracizing. People will they'll want to get you out of the room. They'll stop talking to you. It becomes very uncomfortable, very, very weird.
They will shun you and look away.
Indeed. So there's quite a lot to get through this morning. Were you blown away and super excited and extraordinarily filled with hope and joy and a rejuvenation and you were born into a new world on Monday when Cyril eventually told us who his new cabinet was? I know you were, because it changed everything.
Yeah. The man himself was so excited he feigned illness.
Oh my God! Should we save this for the burning platform, or do you want to just get it off your chest now? Because I have a feeling this.
We have to wait for Kanthan. He is the one that's been waiting with bated breath for this. We have to wait for Kanthan. We're not talking about it until Kanthan comes.
I'm with you. Yeah, let's do that. All right, let's save it.
This morning when I was getting up to come to the office, I was thinking about it, and I was a little bit sad that I only get to come on Thursdays, because so many things happen over weekends. Like 7 goals in one match, like Chris Rock, like by the time I get you all have spoken about everything. And I'm just like, now
That's
what is there for me to talk about?
I was told I have to watch the new Chris Rock special, and I haven't yet. And I know I'm the only person in the whole of South Africa who hasn't seen it yet. So
I haven't seen it either.
I promise I will get onto it today, and then we can talk. But Phumi, we can repeat the hits. Yeah. And also, frankly, people want to hear your opinion on things, not just mine.
Who told you to watch the Chris Rock special?
Lebang.
I could have told Lebang that you're the worst person to give recommendations of stuff to watch to, because you don't watch them and then you don't come back and talk to us about it. You're just Gareth, so infuriating.
Look, I move on very quickly. So once I've seen something, I kind of for example, remember I told you I was going to watch White Lotus season 2. In fact, I told you to watch it as well.
Yes.
And I only got 3 episodes in, and it's been sitting there in the queue, and I just haven't got back to it. So it just shows you sometimes stuff doesn't work.
Although it's like my TV watching has been, you know this, I do 3 things. I watch lots of TV, I listen to lots of podcasts, and I read a lot. Yeah. All those 3 things need some kind of device or power.
Right.
And so the entire world has been thrown into disarray because the power issue is becoming like, that's what it is. But fear not, Sputla's here. Fear not, Sputla's here.
So Sputla Ramaphosa, who is now Minister of Electricity, he's the guy who's going to make all our trouble go away. But I see more and more people are just, this worries me, Phumi. This really worries me. Again, we can save this for the burning platform, but I see more and more people are just accepting, this is how it's going to be. And they're relieved and grateful when they do have power, and they're no longer angry when they don't. We've almost become like an abused woman who she's just pleased when her husband doesn't hit her, but she started to just accept when he does, which is awful. That's not a good attitude.
No, you must stay angry. Yesterday I had a very fascinating meeting, and one of the people in the meeting is somebody who had been, in fact, one of the last treason trials that we had in South Africa, kind of 1987, and he was one of the four accused, and he went on a hunger strike.
Yeah.
With his co-accused for it sounds mad. It sounds mad to have a conversation with somebody who is explaining to you the mechanics. We've read about hunger strikes, we've seen people on TV being like intravenously whatever, and he was one of those people.
Right.
And he was telling the story of how kind of on day 3 you're no longer feeling hungry. On day 1 you feel hungry. You kind of, after 24 hours you feel the hunger and your body kind of, and then on day 2 you stop feeling the hunger pangs, but you start getting weak. Like your body is just, you don't have the energy. Obviously you don't have the energy for anything, and by day 3 you're weak and can't stand up and also hallucinating. I was just like, yo, the shit that people have gone through to get our country to the disappointment for him, the disappointment of how we've regressed. It's just, yeah.
Oh, he must, because when you put your life on the line and you're already on treason trial, which means in those days you would have been put to death, right? That was at the end of his story, ultimately.
And you're just child. And I think the thing we also kind of forget is how young a lot of people were.
Booms. Looks like she's just gone. Oh, she's gone into load shedding. How irritating. Okay, well, I'm here, so we'll just wait for Phumi to come back on, or for, I don't know if they're generators, I don't know if there's electricity, but she's just, her power only came on at 6 o'clock, poor woman, and now she's back off again. So what are we going to do? I'm just amazed that, the number of interesting people that Phumi knows. I mean, here's a guy who was on on death row and went on a hunger strike back in 1987 or whatever. And she's got such interesting friends. So I don't know if you listened yesterday to Martha Ngoyi, but also an amazing woman who stood up to corruption and stood up to all the nefarious people at PRASA. I just think, when we complain about, oh, well, we don't have electricity or we don't have water, we've become so soft. And I know electricity and water are kind of basic things, but, again, a generation ago, if you put these things in perspective, and by no means am I excusing the government. I mean, you know how I feel about this stuff. A generation ago, it was almost impossible for people to have like consistent running water and electricity. Let's say our grandparents. My grandparents, I don't think when they started life together, they had any of those things. It was like post-war. I think it was a really tough time in this country. And I can't imagine that before them it was any easier. So I do think sometimes that we've become a bit soft. But it is amazing to me how Phumi knows these incredible people from all walks of life who've done these really, really tough things in their life. She's got a hell of a Rolodex. Rolodex. There's a word that you haven't heard since the 80s. Hello, Pums. As soon as I put her on, she's like there for a second and then she's gone. This is so weird. There she is. Hello, Pumelele. Sorry. We had you and then we didn't have you. And now we have you again. There we go. Hello. Testing. Sorry. This is not ideal. So anyway, somebody said here in the comments that I mustn't waste my time with the Chris Rock special, which is really, that's opposite feedback to what, here we go. The Chris Rock special's average, says Carl. Don't waste your time. Now that is exactly the opposite to the kind of advice I've been given by everyone else. Everyone else tells me you have to watch it. It's incredible. Derek says we're complacent. and it's scary. It is scary. Very interesting interview with Martha yesterday, says Safa. Yeah, she's quite something. Congo Chris said people wait all day in a queue for 350 Rand, and that's supposed to last them all month, Gareth. We're only 2 steps away from people waiting all day in a queue for a single potato a la communism. Oy, yeah, I'm not complacent, says Slippery Pickle. I'm mad as hell can be, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Well, good. We need more people who are mad. We need more people who are going to stand up to this nonsense. The interview is fascinating. That was obviously yesterday's that you're talking about, Chris. Thank you so much. Gabrielle says we're going to go back into the Stone Age, where we have to kind of dig a well. Everybody in the village has to get together and dig a deep hole that will then fill with water from the water table, and we'll put buckets down. It's not it's not entirely out of the question. I mean, that could be the case. I was talking to somebody the other day. They're putting in a borehole, and I don't know what the legalities are around a borehole. And maybe some people who are listening to us will know. But if you can, you would, right? Even if it costs a lot to put it in, because then you can go off the grid water-wise. Then you're off the grid in terms of electricity if you've got an inverter or solar or whatever. What else do you need to indemnify yourself against? How else can you protect yourself without having to rely on the government? I'd love to know what your ideas are in this respect, because everybody's thinking about it. A friend of mine supplies solar. Apparently, they have had 140% increase, virtually month on month. 140% month on month since probably November and December of last year. So November was X level. December was 140 times that, or 140% increase of that. So 1.4 times that. Then January was 1.4 times December, and February was 1.4 times January, and so on through the year so far. And I mean, that's incredible. So if you're in the solar business, ka-ching, right? But it just shows you how people are, and people will spend money they don't even have. I mean, I see that the banks are also giving loans to people on solar and on inverters and things, because obviously the electricity being irregular means that they want to make your property more valuable, especially if you've got a bond. And there's no value in a property if you don't have solar. Well, not no value, but it's obviously less valuable. So in a country like this, where you kind of want to go off the grid, and I mean, ultimately, if you looked at this from the big picture point of view, and not just from our own irritations and frustrations around electricity provision, ultimately, it's probably a really good thing that we're making more and more people who can afford to be independent. Those who cannot afford to be independent, I mean, again, the poor get poorer. They get punished even more than everyone else. So what do you even say about that? While we're waiting for Phumi, a couple of news stories that are worth discussion this morning. And you can call us, by the way, if you want to get on the line, you can do so. 083 295 5769. That's the number you can get us on. 083 295 5769. I've put it on the screen, and you can jump on the phone right now if you want to and talk to us. Here's Phumelele. How's it, Pums? Did you have another bout of load shedding?
This was the power coming back on and the generator going off, and like most old things, it takes me a few minutes to get up and running again.
Well, thank you. All right, so you were talking about this guy who was on trial for treason. He was on a hunger strike, and while you were getting back on, I was saying to people, you know such fascinating people. Do you think that we've become soft when you talk to someone like that? Right.
Yes.
We've become really soft.
Yes.
We don't have the kind of fortitude that they used to have, right?
So I'm certain you have seen, like most of us, the revisionist history that we're seeing on Twitter, particularly South African Twitter. Lots of apartheid denialism, lots of
apartheid denialism. Is that going on? From where?
This is the word from all sorts of people. And a couple of weeks ago, there was actually a thread where somebody said, the 2000, number 2000, those are people born in the 2000s, want a rematch with apartheid because they think our parents were soft.
Ooh, 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 ooh. This is, I'll never forget, Phumi. This is actually a thing. The first person to ever use this terminology was a guy called Barry Wronger. You remember Barry Wronger? And he was famous for reviewing movies and all kinds of other things. But he was also a very good writer. And I remember I was producing a show for him and I hated being his producer because it was he did a show that I was not interested in, and he wanted these guests and those guests, and it was horrible. Anyway,
why was Alan Ford not doing that? Because that's Alan's life.
Yeah, I think he was. He took over for me. I don't remember. Anyway, I was Barry's producer for about 3 or 4 days, and while I was sitting talking to him, he was kind of thinking out loud, and he said, the problem with so many of the young people at that stage in the ANC that were not in the struggle is that they had struggle envy, which I thought was such an interesting way of putting it. And
yes,
when you talk about these guys and girls who are on they're on Instagram or on Twitter or on social media at the moment, and they're busy talking about how they would have done it better, and Mandela was a sellout, and all those leaders of the ANC didn't fight hard enough, and they would have taken up arms. And no, you wouldn't. It's like a whole bunch of people.
Listen.
Everybody says, if I were in Nazi Germany in 1938, I would have stood up to Hitler. No, you wouldn't.
These are the people who cannot live 30 minutes without Wi-Fi. It's like the level of their human rights being taken away. It's like, no Wi-Fi. And
so I don't see them. I mean, Julius is one of these people, right? Because he's always talking about, we will fight, we will fight. As soon as the presidential security guards pitch up in Parliament, he runs.
Yay, winner. Tear gas. Do you know what? I never know what that thing is called that the old cops used to carry, like in winches. It's like a short
like a baton?
Like a baton. It's like a baton. Like, can you imagine that? Can you imagine somebody clobbering you with that thing?
I thought about it. Okay, so I drove through the center of Pretoria a couple of weeks back, and it just looks like absolute shit. This is our capital city, and I drove past a lot of those government departments that are around the union buildings. There are all these buildings that are full of like public works and all these ministries that we've appointed new ministers for, but the buildings are looking disgusting, and there's grass growing everywhere, and the roads themselves are not looking in very good condition. And this is our capital city. It used to be, and I'm not being one of those nostalgic people, but people used to come from other places in South Africa and even the world to see these jacaranda-lined streets, these beautiful buildings like the Union buildings, the presidential guest house, the embassies, because there are all these beautiful embassies around Pretoria. And I just look at it now and I'm like, this is a disgrace. And I saw this week they've replaced the mayor again. He's been deposed because apparently he was insolvent. So you can't trust someone who's been insolvent to run the municipality.
And it's just would let him be a councillor.
Yeah. So we talk about, the electricity problem at a national level, the water problem, but we can't even manage municipalities properly because there's so much politics involved. Like, I don't give a shit what party the mayor of Pretoria is from. I just want someone who will make it look like things work and actually make things work if they can. I mean, if you go to the National Archives, which is an important building in South Africa, it's a place where we store all our records. You can go there and collect all kinds of interesting things from, 200 years ago, if you need to, including every piece of legislation that's been published. You can go there and read newspaper articles. You can go and see what the government are busy doing in 1995 or whatever. And it's a really important place to keep everything together. It just looks like you know those abandoned places like during a zombie apocalypse where you half expect to see like the Walking Dead walking around and you like have
and this is
a
this is
game.
the thing, right? All these like 2000s that are ready for a rematch with apartheid should like just congregate themselves and bring brooms. They don't have to like bring sticks to fight or anything. They must just bring brooms and bags and just pick up the rubbish and pull out the weeds and sweep the streets and just do that for half a day. I don't want them to do lots of things. I don't want them to bring down a government. I just want them. I mean, we can hardly get them to show up to vote, but I do just want them to just show up and just do that. Just show me we can do just that, young people. Then we will trust you with the next thing of bringing down.
We won't put you on treason trial and we won't force you to do a hunger strike. We just want you to help us clean up and we'll come and help you.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all the other generations, if they see the young people of this country actually doing something instead of just saying something, everyone will join in. Everybody will. I promise you, people will come from far and wide to help tidy up and make this place better.
I don't want them facing down bullets or, you know, police used to also carry whips.
Shambox.
The police also used to carry shambox. Along with that little, is it called a donkey peel, that thing? Or is that just what they call it in the township?
It is hilarious. It's a donkey peel. I mean, like a donkey's penis. Yeah, it does look like that, though. It's like a baton. You're right. That's what it is.
Okay, so because that's what they call it, a lokshini, right? They call it a that. Like, I don't want them facing down any of those things. I just want just that.
Yeah. Just that. It's not too much to ask. And then they can prove how brave they are just by actually making a difference.
Just let them face down the weeds and the rubbish. Let's start there.
Yeah, start there. If we can get that right, we can move on to other things. I mean, we always hear about how we've got, you know, almost 40% youth unemployment. Well, there's plenty of work to be done. And I'm fairly sure that if we could appropriate money for the pointless things that's, you know, so many government projects have apportioned money for, we could certainly put aside some money to start making our capital city a little bit better. All our cities, actually.
All our cities, all our everywhere, all our cities, all our townships, all our.
And by direct contrast, and I'm not saying this because they're a client of ours, but we did have Willie Vos from Waterfall City on Monday. Driving through Pretoria a couple of weeks ago and seeing what a dump it is, and then driving through Waterfall City yesterday and seeing how beautiful it is, how well it's maintained, how traffic is under control. You know, there are people thinking about things there. There's shops and there's Wi-Fi and there are people. I mean, Waterfall City is just, it's unbelievable what's going on there, because at lunchtime yesterday, the one restaurant that I went to at this new shopping center, which they only put up like, I don't know, end of last year, it was full. It was full of people. They're all sitting there, you know, very first world. It could have been, you know, Nice in France. But then you look at the center of Pretoria and you're like, this looks like the Central African Republic. It's just, it's worlds apart. And these are both two places in one country. And I keep thinking of Thabo Mbeki's speech of two South Africas all those years ago.
You know that there is I don't know if it's going ahead, because I saw a poster on one of the social, or somebody sent it to me, that it's supposed to be a national shutdown, like Juju
20th
is supposed on the 20th, which is the day before the public holiday. So if you're looking for something to do with your long weekend, that you can participate in that.
Yeah.
But and then I saw a poster saying it's been cancelled, but I don't know if it's.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it's fake news. I don't know if it's fake news. We'll see. We'll see on the 20th. But I wish that's what he would like organize, right? So let's organize and we know he can do this. We know he can mobilize people in red t-shirts to do all sorts of things.
Hold on, Phumi. I mean, this is so lazy. So it's the day before a public holiday. So between a weekend and a public holiday, a lot of people won't be going to work anyway. A lot of people will take leave. They'll get away. They'll just stay at home.
They'll be free to go.
Yeah,
They'll
so
be free to participate in whatever he's putting together. What's wrong
is
with
that
you?
how you see it? I see it as him like trying to claim credit for things that are just not open on that day anyway.
No, no. I just thought he's being thoughtful. People have already taken the day off. People are already available. So this is what they can do at that time. They, you know, I thought that was a well thought out plan.
Ricky
No?
says whichever donkey supplied the donkey peels, very blessed.
Are they really blessed if that donkey peel is in the hand of the policeman and not on the donkey?
Well, I mean, we talk about the police. I was genuinely, because you remember they used to drive around in those yellow buckies.
Yeah, it
with a
was called a yeah. I remember that.
Those were scary. When you saw those, you knew there was shit going down. Now, when you see the
Eh.
police, you immediately think, there's some dodgy business here, but you're not scared. Like when the police pull up next to you now, and I don't want a country where we're scared of the police, but I would rather have a country where the crooks are scared of the police than a country where everybody mocks and laughs at the police. And I feel like we're closer to the latter than the former. You know what I mean?
In the township where I'm from,
Yeah.
there was something called a Melo Yellow, right? There was
Yes.
even a song about Melo Yellow, like one of those struggle songs that people sang. And Melo Yellow, ne? I think that like a Casper or whatever. And it had I'm not sure if they were police or soldiers, but this was a very common sight. And it was a damn scary sight too,
It was
right?
scary.
So it was very scary because you could be sure that there would be tear gas, there would be shooting. You don't know if it's, and I think I've told you the story of a very vivid memory that I have being about 10 years old with my friends and just running in the dust and the Caspers and all of that stuff. This is the reality of our country, but
no, the 2000s want to complain about how they'd have done a better job. Hey, good morning.
They can't even answer the phone. 2000s.
Hello.
Morning.
Morning.
It's me again. Hi, it's Linda.
Hey, Linda.
I want to say something. My 2 cents, let's put it. I have quite a few people that come from overseas often to South Africa. And for the first time now. They find the country unbelievable. From Europe. And, sometimes, I'm surprised that they find the country unbelievable. Besides the water and the electricity and the roads looking the way they do, they just amaze how, they imagine how it was before and what it has become. Do you understand? I'm not born in South Africa, but I'm a South African through and through. And I sometimes tell them, you should have seen this place before. Okay, I'm not talking, forget apartheid, all that. I'm just talking about what the country itself used to look like.
Yeah, just we were talking like 10 years ago even.
Yes. So, and they're still amazed. What amazes me is how amazed they are by the country. And imagine if we kept...
amazed in a good way.
Yeah, they're blown away because actually they can't believe that A, things still work when they look the way they do, and B, that there's so much potential and that we're just sitting on it. Yeah.
Exactly. And like you were saying just now, the lack of employment. Open more what you call home affairs. Open more and give employment. Train the people, give employment.
If they opened up in every city and town in South Africa, they opened up a government like satellite station where they would actually give people double their social grant if they will prove that they've cleaned up this block or this street, or they've improved that, or they've painted this wall, or but they obviously have to, there's a list of stuff that needs doing in every municipality. And if they hand this list to people and say, right, if you do one of these, you get an extra 100 Rand on your grant. Come back to us once you've done it.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, for as a taxpayer and someone who doesn't have time to do this stuff myself, because I'm out there, and Phumi and you and everyone else, hopefully we're bringing in the money that fills the treasury, right? So I personally don't mind if we spent money on things like that. I'd be thrilled. I'd be thrilled to know that my tax money was going to that. We had the tax ombudsman the other day. This would make me happy. So let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. And how do I say? You're right, and it is scary to be so. Okay, let me take. What time do I have electricity so that I can go home or I can go somewhere else? I mean, it is. You want a cup of coffee in the morning? It is frustrating beyond words. And the water story is even worse. So I just wanted to say something.
No, I'm pleased you called. You're right. Listen, and also. We always see ourselves as the worst. I mean, here's Cunning Stunt with just got back from Italy. You won't believe how filthy the streets of Rome are. South Africa is so much more than anywhere in Europe.
But we have sorry guys, here at the office we can't get into serious, major, big discussions about the little things. I work in a crazy office. And we were talking about how our parents, so and Gareth, I'd love to know if you had a similar thing with your parents, where my mom would say, Aila, so not here, right? So if you're out in the street and your friends are doing this and all of that is happening over there, that's fine, but not here, not in my house, not in this family. This is not how we are.
Exactly. Yes.
And I feel like that's what South Africa needs to be like too. So Rome can be filthy. If they want to have a filthy, Rome can be filthy, Paris can smell funny, but not here. We should not be okay with that. We should not be okay with being compared with how bad other people are. So we're bad, but it's worse over there. No. Sorry, guys. No, we we should definitely have a Aila, not here. If that's how other people are, that's fine.
I like this because you always say that it's up to each of us in our own way to start this stuff, right? So famous mama says, we actually are doing it in our area. My mom is in charge, made a massive movement to clean everything up besides just running her business. But again, like this is where I say Waterfall's amazing. We've got this this kind of neighborhood group in our estate. I mean, I know estates are easier to run than countries, but you start with that. Make sure your own environment is nice and clean. And if you could sort out your own environment, who knows that you can't make it bigger and sort that out. Your circle can keep expanding. Seamus says, the want everything for free generation has become a culture of its own. Well, that's also the problem, is you want it and you want it now.
Yesterday, you mean?
Ricky says, have you ever been in Uitenhage? Yes, that place is filthy. No, I haven't. I haven't been in Uitenhage.
I haven't been to Uitenhage.
And I'm in no hurry to go. I mean, I've never heard anyone say anything nice about Uitenhage, ever. Ever. Sounds like it could be one of the worst places in the world. Gabrielle says, we traveled to Dubai in December, and even though it's man-made, everything works and it's absolutely beautiful. The best part of Dubai is the maximum speed on the freeways is 180 kilometers an hour.
Yikes.
And I can promise you, they probably have less accidents, even though their speed limit is so high, than we have here, because people here are on their phones, they're not paying attention, they're driving unroadworthy vehicles, they don't have real licenses, and I'm pretty sure we have more accidents than they do in Dubai, despite that speed limit. Anyway, I mean, Shani says, this is interesting. Let's fill the town halls with exercise bikes. We can take turns every 15 minutes to generate electricity and fill batteries for the municipalities.
Whoa!
Congo Chris, who is usually, very funny, he says this morning, people in this country have no self-respect and no self-discipline. It's really that simple. Not a day goes by that I don't see someone throwing a KFC packet out of a window. It's disgusting and disrespectful. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I am also
here he is. He's living up to his reputation.
Ivo.
He says Uitenhage is a septic boil in the armpit that is Port Elizabeth.
I think the people of Uitenhage, you must stand up You must not allow yourself septic
That is so
word.
funny.
Yo, people
right.
of Utenake, don't allow yourselves to be called this. You must do something. Organize like street cleanup days, and also it'll make, if we get to see each other more, it'll get out and see each other more, get to know your neighbors, all of that good stuff. Then
So, Phumi,
when they're strangers.
I want to hear what you think of this story, which is in the news, because we are going to squeeze a few of these in before we get to the burning platform. Protests
Yeah, because
throughout
we didn't do the news last week.
Correct. Protests throughout institutions of higher learning have been spurred on by national issues and not institution-specific issues, and students have valid reasons to object. This is the consensus on the Department of Education's briefing that they held the other day with the universities and South African public colleges to the National Assembly. Despite this, the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Buti Manamela, said that the department was concerned about the violent nature of some of the protests. The virtual meeting heard about students in the Western Cape assaulting educators and students in KZN committing acts of arson. And of course, we've seen some videos of this. Now, I wanted to know what you thought of this.
So, this is a very complex situation. First of all, these students see the way that South Africans protest. So how they behave is what they see has been allowed to happen. This is how all service delivery protests, this is why they behave in this manner too. But when the fees must fall movement started all those many years ago, and Jacob Zuma, you'll remember, was the president, and he said, we'll make it happen, make free education happen. And Blade Nzimande was and is still the Minister of Higher Education. They did not really engage, begin to fix the problems, make a concerted effort. None of those things happened. And I'm going to call out the EFF for this. What they did do, these parties, the ANC, the EFF, and some others, they instead bought the student leaders who were the loudest tins in that entire thing, right? They have co-opted them. Naledi Chirwa is now what? An MP out there calling the president a small boy, and has forgotten. She is now comfortable, and she has forgotten what it is that allowed her to get there in the first place. Many students are still getting excluded, financially excluded. Many students who were part of that fallist kind of movement who were not the ones on TV. What's her name also from the ANC, who is now actually the head of the portfolio committee on higher education, MP as well. Nice fat salary, sitting in government housing, gets a car, gets a phone, all of those things, and have not moved the dial. Not moved the dial in any way. Of course, This is going to keep rearing its ugly head. It is going to keep rearing its head until the government does something about it. This is unfortunately going to keep happening because nobody is listening or responding appropriately. And we should, as a nation, be making a decision about what importance higher education has in South Africa and what we're willing to invest in the future of this country. Germany made that decision all those many years ago. Higher education is free. And look where Germany's economy is as compared to many other nations.
Also, this is something that I've been deliberately misquoted by certain people in the news this week for saying.
How else can we manufacture outrage?
Yeah, of course. If you listen to the whole of our show on, I think it was Monday, with Leanne and Craig Urbani, we were talking about these protests that were going on at just Wits in that case. But I mean, they've obviously spiraled out in other places as well. And, at no point have I said that education is stupid and unimportant and that we shouldn't be sending people to university. But I did say we've got to take a much more holistic approach. We've got to look at what we did with those technicons, which we shut down, where we used to teach
teachers training college.
Teachers training colleges. I mean, these are places that provided many people not only with employment, but also with skills, with the ability to enter the workforce and immediately make themselves useful. What about apprenticeships? What about people who want to go out and immediately do work that can earn them money? And you look at the kinds of people who've made really big money in the last 20 years. They're not people who have jobs. They're people who create jobs. They're people who start businesses. And we have very, very smart, very streetwise people in this country who might not need a tertiary education degree in order to start something. They just need an internship or an opportunity in a small business or something like that. And they will flower. They will burst into bloom. And I think we're also fixated on this pipeline of higher education that people think once they've got that degree, they're guaranteed an income. I heard an absolutely terrifying statistic from Dion Chang, who was on our show on Tuesday. Listen to this, Phumi.
Oh, that was fascinating.
It was amazing. So Dion Chang, I'm just going to look it up. I don't want to misquote him, right? So Dion Chang sent this to me. He said, if it comes up again, this thing about higher education, he said, of the millions of people who applied for the 350 Rand relief grant during the pandemic, remember? 800,000 of those people were postgraduates with degrees. So, what does that tell you? If 800,000 of the people who applied for a 350 Rand grant to help them through COVID were university-educated postgraduate people, 800,000 of them, then the system has failed. Then there are questions that need to be asked of the universities. Why is it so expensive? And what are you actually teaching people? Like how can 800,000 postgraduate students or postgraduate young adults not be able to find jobs? That is a damning statistic. That on its own. Forget about all the others. And then we're worried about like, you've got to get your place at university so you can study a degree in, I don't know, social.
But also now when you talk about all of those other, the technicons and the teachers training colleges and all of those other environments that have been shut down, what you've now done is you've also just shrunk the options that people have, and you've made the funnel, you've made the funnel smaller of people. Yep. Now you only have 200,000 seats in first year in universities across the country. And now you have 1 million kids all competing for those 200 seats. But if you open it up and you give more opportunities in more spaces for young people to get into, higher education, to get further training, but how else do you create more bureaucracy? How else do you create more opportunities for consultants to make money?
Yeah, that's also a good point. Consultants. But Signet says quite rightly, we need a balance of all professions in South Africa. Doctors make bad plumbers and vice versa. Some are meant for trades, others for professional degrees. We need to push people into their lane. I think that's right. I think lots of people just have this idea that you are superior if you have a professional degree, which is not the case.
But this is why when I started the responses, it's a complex issue that's got many different facets. But all of them, and is Blade really the person to be thinking about all of those things? Is Angie Motshekga the person to be? Because it's not really, the problem is not just when you get to university or when you are getting financially excluded. It's about the entire value chain. It's about early childhood development. It's about primary school. It's about foundation phase. It's about at every step of the way. That's why and are the people we have in those spaces thinking about these things? Are they thinking about them? Are they the right people thinking about these things? Have we got?
Yeah.
My head already hurts, Gareth.
We've also got to be honest about the fact that for many people, university is just an escape from reality where someone else is paying your bills. And that is the case for so many people. There are lots and lots of people in South Africa they're sitting around pretending to study They're drinking every night. They are partying. They're staying for free in a res because they've got some kind of grant. Oh, hang on. Got a call here.
What is that?
It actually rings. So this is not great. It's ringing, but I can't see anything on the screen. This is very weird. Okay.
Turn off the ringer. You're going to like trigger the 2000s. They don't want to hear the phones ring.
Yeah. Just call us back. Sorry. And by the way, the line is open. That's why you heard that. You can hear it. It's all real. We don't bullshit you on the show. 083-295-5769. All right.
And what about WhatsApps? Can people send voice notes?
Yeah, you could send. In fact, I've got a voice note here for you. This is quite fun. It's a couple of days ago, but take a listen to this. This is Gareth.
He just called.
Listen to this.
Hi guys. I'm currently listening to the podcast with Siv, Gareth, and Leanne talking about Andrew Tate. And I just want to say, I went to all-girls school, so I consider myself partly feminist, and we have to move out of the kitchen. And it all changed when I had a baby boy, and I realized just how hard men have it, and how much the responsibility of how men turn out is also how their moms raised them. So while I'm very conscious about, women's rights and all that stuff, I'm very conscious about, giving him the foundation. It sounds so sloppy. It's so difficult to explain, but yes, more empathetic to men's rights. And also, I used to joke around about man flu, only to realize you guys are actually born that way. So I don't joke about it anymore. Anyway, love the show. Bye.
Very good. That's Gabby. Hey, you're on air. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, guys. Good morning, Phumi. It's your boss on the Chris.
Oh, how's it? How are you?
Hi there, guys. I'm good, thanks, guys. How are you guys doing this morning?
Good. Go ahead.
So I thought I'd just weigh in on this higher education thing, because I've been on the tuition side of the stuff, and you really get to see behind the veil when you are actually carrying out the classes yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I know you and Pillay haven't always seen eye to eye, so you really hit the nail on the head last week. You said that NSFAS is not going to fund people to fail a third, fourth, and fifth time, and that's really just a massive weight on the finances of that institution.
So hold on, Fikile Mbalula said that NSFAS is not going to keep funding people to fail third and fourth and fifth time.
Yes.
Well, I couldn't agree with him more. I think everybody agrees with him, right? Except the students who've failed 3, 4, 5 times.
Exactly, and that's a massive problem with the student movement is that, firstly, a lot of the people that are protesting aren't even students. And then secondly, that the ones that are protesting are usually there for their third, fourth, or fifth year, and they have to do that.
All right, it's breaking up kind of badly, so I'm going to let you go. But yeah, I think we get the point there, and that's a point well put, right, Phumi?
But we must also be careful of blanket statements, right? So one of the things that NSFAS don't do is they don't fund kind of fourth and fifth year. But when you are now studying, and Wits is one of the culprits here, when and you did the LLB route, right? When you have a degree like an LLB where you have to have an undergrad, and then that you can only do in fourth or fifth year, now you have a different type of problem. You can't have a blanket approach to all spheres of study, and these are some, and that's why I'm saying it's a complex and very nuanced conversation that we're having. There are many moving parts in this, right? And those things have all got to be considered, and I do agree, if you're doing a 3-year degree and you're in your 5th year or your 6th year, then your problem is different. Your problem is not so much the money, your problem is perhaps between the ears, or maybe what you're studying. Wow. But what? All of these, but it's all of these things that need to be thoroughly considered all along the way. And you can't just make a blanket statement. So, if you're in your 5th year of study, if you're in a 3-year degree in your 5th year of study, yes, you've got a problem. But if you are in your 5th year of study for something like medicine or law, or, but we only have, one tool, and it's very blunt. Yeah,
That's
this
it.
is the.
Yeah. And if you only
this is
have a
the
hammer,
difficult.
everything looks like a nail.
That's,
that's the problem.
That's the thing.
Brandon says, I've made it to IOL. Gareth Cliff slams Wits Protests calling for free education. I'm not paying. I don't give a shit whether you're educated or not. Brilliant journalism. Yeah, you see, again, misquote. I mean, I'm certainly not paying for other people's children. I'm not. I don't have any. No one's paying me extra back because I didn't have children to burden the system. So why should I pay for yours? I think that's true on every front, not just for education. If you have a people carrying vehicle with 10 kids in it, I don't have to be happy about you taking up 3/4 of the road with your 10 children. It doesn't have to be something I praise and respect and love. I don't have to be a huge fan of that, do I? So don't expect me to get excited about that shit. And if you want me to then pay for them and I don't get a rebate because I didn't have children, I still have to throw in, and that money has to be distributed to all these kids who maybe don't have anything. And I mean, that's how countries work. So we know everything gets put in the pot and then it gets thrown out. In this country, most of it gets stolen, but you get my point. So I don't have to love that, though. And you're not going to make me love that. You're not going to make me go, oh, I can't wait for that. That's the best thing you could spend my money on. I could think of 100,000 things I'd rather spend money on than someone else's kids. Anyway.
Ricky says it took 12 years to complete his 7-year CA course. And are you proud of yourself, Ricky? Are you proud?
Yeah. Congo Chris says, Phumi, I agree with you, but people aren't even showing up to the lectures. And then you see the same names on the student register year after year. Well,
look, and again, you see why I keep saying that the issue is systemic. It's all throughout the system. It's the entire value chain. Because if you're not showing up for lectures, you're obviously not going to pass. And if you haven't passed, how are you getting back on that register? Like somebody should be just the same as when you are in high school or primary school, when you haven't met the minimum requirement to move on to the next year. There is somebody having a conversation, a teacher having a conversation with the parents, or the teachers having conversations among themselves that say, is this child in the right environment? Are they learning what they need to be? And if on the second year you're still not getting the concepts, you're still not consolidating the learning, the conversation that is had is maybe you're not a mainstream kid. Maybe you need to. Why is nobody having that conversation? If you're doing second year for the third year, why is nobody having a conversation that says, maybe you're not a mainstream kid. Maybe you should be in assisted learning.
There we go. All right. I don't think we're going to solve all of these problems, but I'm glad I asked you, Phumi, because you usually have a sensible approach to these things, as opposed to me where I mouth off and then I get misquoted in every other publication. Or they quote me, but they quote me out of context, and it sounds like I'm the meanest person in the whole world. As you say, the outrage machine needs to be fed. So let's keep.
Although I do think, I must say, I do think that university, higher education is also the place where you build your character away from home and your parents, right? So the partying and the drinking is not so bad if it's not the only thing that you're doing. You should be partying. You should be, out there exploring all the facets of who you are, because it's not, university is more than just the things you learn in the books. It's also the things you learn about yourself and managing your time and people around you, and, managing the pressure of, I'm not going to go to this party because I've got to write this exam tomorrow, or I can go to this party, but only for an hour. All of that. It's all important. It's all important.
Well, Gogos was saying university is a lot of fun, so much drinking and partying, so many life lessons. Yes, but I'm not paying for your kids to drink and have fun and learn life lessons. Sorry. I don't even mind if you can show me that they graduate and they become responsible people. But that's asking for a lot from my side, I suppose, because God forbid that I should actually want, a percentage of our tax money spent on something that gives us a return. We started this conversation by talking about how, like, we just want the places that we live in and work in to work. That's all. So I think maybe we're just aiming a little bit too high here. All right, when we come back, it's the Burning Platform. Exciting stuff this morning. We're going to be rejoined for the first time in a long time by Ivo Vegter, who's written a blistering attack on Cyril Ramaphosa, which, of course, is going to sit very well with some people and not so well with others. We're interested to hear your opinions. You can get hold of us on 083-295-5769. You can also drop us a voice note or a comment in the comment section. Please like and subscribe. Otherwise, I get into trouble with the producers. So do that. Let's get onto it. It's all coming up in the Burning Platform next. CliffCentral.com.
We are talking about the female reproductive system, and specifically today we're going to talk about vaginas.
More or less, actually less than 40% of women can achieve a vaginal orgasm.
Did you say less than 40?
Less than 40%. So, yeah, I know I'm going to be criticized for this that I'm saying, but there's no G-spot. And please stop looking for it. There's different pleasurable areas in your vagina that will give you orgasm. But like I said, less than 40% of women can get vaginal orgasms.
That was the Tea Health Show, empowering you with knowledge. Download all previous episodes on your favorite podcast platform. The Tea Health Show is brought to you by Tea Clinic.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
I know somebody who actually work with was telling me about the time when lightning struck their house, and essentially all the plugs got fried. And because they didn't have those little red, I don't know what it's called, but those plugs, which
was a requirement by the insurance.
Was a requirement by the insurance, and every single appliance got destroyed, but they didn't pay out. And I was like, "What? It seems like something that should be kind of at least discussed." So just read those terms and conditions and see what's going on there.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
All right, we are live. It is Thursday morning. It is time for the Burning Platform. We're going to get into all the stories this week that have caught everybody's attention, all the things that are going on in the news. I don't know if you heard that promo about Dr. Mark's show, Vaginal Orgasms, for me. There's some interesting stuff going on there, huh?
40%, huh?
40% of women cannot achieve a vaginal orgasm. Is that what she said?
That's what she said. It's quite a lot of information for 7 o'clock in the morning.
Do you think that there is a correlation, not necessarily causation, between 40% youth unemployment and 40% non-vaginal orgasm? These are the big questions.
This information is just too much. I think there might be a correlation with another piece of information I read that something like 60% of all men ejaculate within 2 minutes. That may be the reason. 2 minutes may not be enough time for people to.
It may not be enough.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, guys.
Well,
There's a serious conversation to be had here.
There
And
is, but it's not going to happen with Phumi and I, I'm afraid. Not in the burning platform either. So we got a lot to talk about this morning in the news. Phumi and I have kind of discussed some of the issues around student protests and tertiary education, but we've got so much more to get into. Ivo wants to talk a little bit about the National Council of Provinces, which we never really pay any attention to, but they are our second chamber of parliament. I mean, they're an important part of the South African political landscape. There are people who have been sitting in the National Council of Provinces that we're paying for. We take Parliament very seriously, but we only think about the National Assembly. We don't think about the National Council of Provinces. And they are our upper house, supposedly, so we've got to talk about them a little bit today. We never do. And also the move against objectivity in journalism, according to Ivo. Ivo always talks about all kinds of interesting things. One of the things that's a big bugbear for him is environmental stuff. So we may have a chance to get into that too. But Ivo, it's always good to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. I am excellent. Cheerful as a spring morning.
I'm very, very happy to hear that. We need some cheer. Phumi and I were just bemoaning a whole bunch of shit in the first hour, so we need some cheer. And the other person who's joining...
I'm sorry, that's the end of the cheer that I have available.
All right, well, we'll have to try and make some, or we'll manufacture cheer. And here is Kanthan Pillay, who is also joining us this morning. Of course, Kanthan knows the burning platform like the back of his hand. He's pretty much been a part of it from the very get-go. And Kanthan always has quite a lot to say. And Kanthan, I know you have plenty to say about the president's new cabinet. Now,
look at him beaming with joy.
Well, just so excited. Did you get the cabinet that you've always dreamed of, Kanthan?
Guys, you might remember the last time around we said that a cabinet reshuffle is not going to make an iota of difference to what we're trying to do. So at that level, I don't really care. Look, frankly, we've still got the usual suspects in place. Becky Cele is still there. Ibrahim Patel is still there. We've got Angie Motsecha is still there. Blade and Zimande is still there. In other words, the most dysfunctional of the most dysfunctional have been retained in exactly the positions that they belong to.
And can I ask you all, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, who's been in cabinet since the Mandela era, she has always been there. It's amazing to me
No,
how
actually, she was out of there when she was in the African Union. For a brief period, yes.
She seemed to come back in just like someone who had a seat. Yes. Anyway, the point is this also. I mean, this is the woman who ran against Cyril at Nasrec. She was one of the people who said that if he's re-elected and he wasn't ousted in just this last ANC's big conference, that she would get out and leave. Does she have so little else to do or so little self-respect, or is she being pressured by other people that she couldn't stand up and say, you know what, I don't want your crappy ministry of women, children, and people with disabilities. I'm out. Or does she have nothing else to go to?
I have no idea. I'm not privy to what goes on within the Dlamini-Zuma household these days. But I suspect that from Cyril's point of view, it's better to have her in the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. Phumi, hang on. Say that again.
What about Lindiwe? She was also there from all those many years ago, has moved from position to position, and now she's out.
No, she must go to the CCMA.
I mean, the issue here is simple. All that he did was he basically handled his political opponents, right? By which I mean he kicked Lindiwe Sisulu out, and he, put NDZ in the union buildings where he can, in the little creche area over there where he can keep an eye on it. That's effectively what he did. The rest is all meaningless reshuffling. What baffled me He's had a report. He said he was going to. They were working on a plan to reduce the size of the cabinet. Right? But first, they were going to increase it.
Yeah.
Because that's seems reasonable to me.
Genius.
If I'm going to paint a car red, I'm going to start by painting it blue.
Yes.
He's actually had a plan. This is not about them working on a plan. He's had a plan on his desk for 4 years, saying this is how we reduce the cabinet to 22 ministers, I believe it was. Now we're back at 30, which gives South Africa one of the, if not the biggest cabinet in the world. This is absolutely its job for pals. It's all about his own loyalties and his own position within the party, consolidating his power base. None of this had anything to do with the people of South Africa, and right from the start, when he turned up late, and kept postponing it and so on.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same president that in 2018 said starting on time for us in the ANC is a big thing, because Nelson Mandela told us that if you don't start on time, then you're not respecting your audience. He said there would be an end to African time. He completely disrespects the people of South Africa. This was not about the people of South Africa. This was not about the needs of the country. This was purely about the needs of Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC. That's all he did.
I just want you to know on the issue of African time that true Africans know that you wait for the train because the train's not going to wait for you. They're always on time.
No, exactly. I mean, look, I think.
Wait. What are we talking about trains in South Africa now? Can Phumi?
I'm just talking about Africans. I'm talking about Africans and waiting because nobody waits for you. And this notion that African time is you're going to be late and because everybody's going to wait for you. I think this might be a notion of African politicians.
This may seem like a silly thing, and I'm glad that you reminded us that Nelson Mandela was the one who said you don't keep your audience waiting, but it's actually the rudest thing in the whole world. And you remember during those family meetings we had over COVID, he was also late. He was late for almost all of them. And I just think you can't get your shit together. Like a national address is a big deal that most presidents only get to do a few times in their lives, where they know people will be listening. They know people have to pay attention. And those first family meetings were so important because they were his opportunity not only to get everybody to rally behind him. Now we look back on them and it looks ridiculous because all those stupid things they made us do were completely pointless. Completely. And did everything except help people remain healthy or keep the country's economy going or keep people employed. In fact, it was...
made things worse.
Right. But at the time we were like, got to watch Cyril tonight. Got to make sure we know what's going on. He also had the opportunity in those family meetings because he was in completely honest one-to-one communication with every citizen to have fired half of the people who were a problem to him. He could have got rid of them. And look at what happens, by the way, when someone leaves the ANC's fold, when they leave the comfortable world of cabinet or of the NEC, they disappear. You can't find anyone to report on 3 words that Ace Magashule is saying right now, can you?
Yeah, it's cold outside the ANC. That's always been a phrase, and it's absolutely true. Leaving the ANC, if you've got a comfortable position within it, leaving is a really, really brave or stupid thing to do. Probably both.
All right. Well, are you at least excited about our Minister of Electricity? I mean, Sputla Ramaphosa. Surely this is a good thing. Come on, Ivo. Don't be so negative.
No, I'm not excited about him at all. He used to be mayor of Pretoria, mayor of Tshwane.
Yeah.
And he's got a civil engineering degree. He apparently specialized in transport engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a few degrees on top of that in terms of, politics and business and so on that take him up to a PhD. So he's got some qualifications, which I suppose is a good thing. But the closest that I could find that he was ever involved with electricity was a very dodgy smart meter contract in Tshwane, which people from that area might remember, where he bought I don't know, several 100,000 smart meters for somewhere north of R1 billion, failed to install most of them, so that the ones that did get installed eventually cost about 160,000 Rand each per unit. They didn't work very well. They didn't tell people their consumption, for example. They weren't really as smart as advertised. The whole deal got cancelled. Before the contract was signed, Pravin Gordhan actually warned him against doing that deal. So, his only experience with electricity is a dodgy tender. I mean, this is Eskom's problem, dodgy tenders. How is he going to fix that? He's got no experience in fixing that. I have absolutely no faith in this whole idea that he's going to sort things out, and he's going to. Oh, and by the way, he's going to slap Gordhan and Gwede Mantashe into line.
Mm-hmm.
So they now agree. So they now agree on things, and Gwede Mantashe doesn't stop undermining everything, and he's going to now suddenly approve all the renewable energy stuff that he failed to approve because he's in the pockets of coal. Yeah, all of this is going to supposedly magically happen. I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I really don't.
Well, I mean, you've written this pretty blistering attack on Cyril Ramaphosa. Are we so fed up with him that you could pretty much say anything you want right now? It's not even going to get a reaction out of people. Because I kind of get the feeling that Phumi was on this train a very, very long time ago, and that maybe, Ivo, your article will find a very warm audience, but that it's not news to anybody. This is your article called "Our Feckless President and His Bloated Self-Serving Cabinet," which people can go and read.
Isn't feckless such a lovely word?
It's a great word.
It's a great word. I stole it. Someone used it earlier in the day.
Saunderson May is fond of using it.
Yes, I love it. I love it too. So I have to steal it and use it.
If you want to read Ivo's article, it's on the Daily Friend, and you can find his bloated self-serving cabinet there as well. So Ivo,
another thing, just while we're on the topic of the new cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy called I forget his name. This is criminal of me, a writer. Anyway, he tweeted and he said, spare a thought for Judge Raymond Zondo, right, who had to swear in Zizi Kodwa, right, whom not too long ago he recommended for criminal prosecution. Right. This is a sign of intent on the part of Cyril Ramaphosa. Right. He says he's going to deal with corruption, but no, does he deal with corruption? Does he recommend Zizi Kodwa for criminal prosecution? No, he gives him a cozy cabinet job.
Yeah,
and it's not news to anyone. It shouldn't be, at least. And the people who were optimistic about Ramaphosa at the start, I never was. I was pessimistic about him right from the start. But I don't think anybody will be surprised anymore that this is all about him. This is all about not acting against corruption. And frankly, it's business as usual.
Can I throw a hint of optimism into this thing and tell you why I'm very excited about this cabinet reshuffle?
Okay, go. We've been waiting for this all week.
All right. Basically, the reason why, in my book, Cyril ended up delaying implementing a cabinet reshuffle is that he was trying his damnedest to not allow Paul Mashatile to become deputy president of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you consider the chain of events that's actually happened over the past several weeks, firstly, remember that Didi Mabuza basically forced Ramaphosa to acknowledge that he needed to be doing a cabinet reshuffle by using the occasion of a funeral to announce that he would be stepping down as deputy president of the country. At which point, Ramaphosa said, no, please don't step down until I do my cabinet reshuffle. And so Ramaphosa then sat back and then didn't do anything. And so Didi Mabuza forced his hand very effectively by resigning as an MP, because you can't be a deputy president of the country unless you happen to be an MP. So that effectively forced a situation where Cyril needed to do a cabinet reshuffle. And I'm reasonably sure that all of the delays that happened were not because of rudeness, but he was trying his damnedest to work out a way at the last minute of preventing Paul Mashatile from becoming deputy president of the country. And now that Paul Mashatile is deputy president of the country, this actually sets up a scenario where, given that Cyril effectively bought his way to the presidency, remember, he doesn't have a constituency. He doesn't have a voting base. Cyril is there because he was able to take money and he was able to buy votes. But now that those votes have been bought, is he ripe for recall? I think the answer to that is yes. And I strongly suspect that right now the long knives are being sharpened, and this is going to set us up for the ability of the ANC to now recall Cyril Ramaphosa. And I think that that's a good thing, because frankly, if I had to choose between Mashatile and Ramaphosa, I would choose Mashatile. Look, make no bones about it. I'm not saying that Mashatile is going to be a less corrupt representative of the ANC than Cyril Ramaphosa is. What I'm saying is that at least during the time that Mashatile served as MEC for finance in Gauteng, which was when Mbazima Shilowa was premier, this province actually worked reasonably well. That was the time at which we got the cow train in place. That was the time at which we had that massive rollout of solar geysers to the east bank of Alex, which if you drive along the N3, you can see to this day. Yeah, so, I don't care if Mashatile runs the Alex Mafia. That's fine. I would rather have the Alex Mafia in place running the country, but actually doing a basic level of service delivery. So now let's talk about Sputla. Okay.
Hold on a second. I just want to point out before you move on to Sputla, if that's true,
yes,
this is even more damning of Cyril, that he at the last minute still was not able to come together, bring a plan. Like, he's just politically incompetent, if nothing else. I mean, how could he not foresee that there would be some kind of a challenge to him? And if he did foresee it, sitting on his hands for 2 weeks while Didi Mabuza manipulates him. Didi Mabuza, who's no rocket scientist himself. And Paul Mashatile has outmaneuvered him too. This shows you how absolutely effete and, as Ivo said, feckless our president is. Now, on to Sputla.
Well, now, from my perspective, okay, Sputla is Mashatile's man. Any disagreements from anyone around here? I'm very clear that Sputla is very much part of Team Mashatile, and again, I think that this is something that Cyril basically didn't want to have to deal with. But given the way in which the votes actually stacked up, this is something that Cyril was forced to deal with, and Sputla ends up being the person that gets drafted there. But remember, at the same time, the fact that you now have this creation of a position effectively within the presidency, this doesn't mean that he has the ability to override Gwede or Praveen, because the ministry in the presidency does not control the departments that actually, firstly, control the electricity supply and distribution, or the procurement of energy generally, but also doesn't really have a budget to be able to implement any sort of rollout, unless there's suddenly a situation where massive amounts of money are pushed into the presidency in order for him to actually try and roll out all of these solar plants, so that the larger Ramaphosa family, and here we're talking about Jeff Khadebe and Patrice Motsepe and all of them who are in the
our first family.
Our first family. Thank you. Yes, that's the phrase I was looking for. But so that they can do their rollout of as independent power producers.
The Rockefellers and Vanderbilts of South Africa.
Yeah.
Listen.
But guys, right now, what I'm trying to say is that look behind the lines. Okay, the ANC is currently tearing itself apart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's and the big battles in the ANC have yet to come. We're going to see over the next year a desperate scramble to try and find some way to buy votes. So, so one of the disastrous things that's coming along next year have been the changes to the pension fund laws. I don't know how many of you have been following this. Ivo, you probably have some indication of this. But effectively what they're going to do is to change the pension fund laws so that you're able to draw out money from your pension before retirement time. Which is, so it's on the one hand, it's going to keep the masses, particularly in terms of public service workers, very happy because they're suddenly going to be able to dip into their pension funds and spend all this money on God knows what. But it's a disaster for the country because in the long term, it means that those are going to be people without pensions and the country is going to have to find some way to support them. But this is going to come into effect in the next tax year with the elections. And it's very clear to me it's a vote buying scheme. So you're going to see a lot of scrambles along these lines, a lot of last minute feeding at the trough in order to effectively buy votes next year. But an ANC that's tearing itself apart, guys, is a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
All right. Phumi?
Remember that I said to you guys after Nasrec that Paul Mashatile is the biggest winner, and that what we're swiftly heading towards is a Paul Mashatile president of the ANC. And you can also see that Paul is playing a long game, and you see it in the way that the local municipality games are playing out. Why is the EFF pulling out? It's very strategic and very, for a long time, particularly in KZN, working coalition with the IFP because they're positioning themselves, so Julius Malema is positioning himself for a presidency of Paul Mashatile and himself as deputy president, hopefully in a coalition. And because they're all reading the signs, right? They're all looking at the polls that we're all looking at, the polls that are saying in the next general election, the ANC is going to dip below 50%. They're going to need a coalition partner. In looking at the way the EFF is playing out in the coalitions in Johannesburg, in Ekurhuleni, and making a very concerted effort of becoming friendly with the ANC in Gauteng. Speaking of Paul Mashatile's men, which is also the current premier of, Gauteng, ANC Panyaza Lusufi, also a Paul Mashatile comrade, Paul Mashatile peer, and Sputla, definitely a Paul Mashatile peer, and all of these individuals and all of the way that they are positioning themselves, the long game is 2024 and what they hope to pull out in 2024. And I think one of the things that we're also, for me, the cabinet reshuffle is neither here nor there. They've got 12 months, maybe 15 months at most before there is.
You say the cabinet reshuffle is neither here nor there, but we've got a poll up, and I think people want to vote in this. My favorite new minister is A, Sputla of electricity, B, NDZ for ladies, kids, and cripples, C, I'm all for more ministers. Those are for the people, obviously we've created that category, especially for those people who think our cabinet is too small. And then finally, I'm not impressed at all for the cynics. So you can go and vote in our poll. Tell us who your favorite new minister is or what your opinion is, and go and vote now. We want to know your thoughts. We will announce the results at the end of the show. So Ivo, can I quickly come to you because you've specifically highlighted something which I think we talk very little about in this country. We actually have another chamber of parliament. There is a whole other chamber that we pay for. And it's been confusing for a lot of us, especially those of us who once studied constitutional law. This is effectively meant to be like our Senate, but they don't really have any power. It's a house to put traditional leaders in so that they feel listened to. There's a lot of lip service that gets paid here. It's a national council of provinces where supposedly the provincial legislature is represented by these people in some sort of national structure. How exactly it works befuddles and confuses even people who are in the National Council of Provinces. What do they do? How do they do it? Why is it dominated by the ANC? And why might the ANC still control it even if they lose their majority in the National Assembly?
Well, they do as little as possible, which is, I think, what you could say for any sort of government structure or government body. Most of us notice it when, when there's a SONA, the State of the Nation address, and it's a joint sitting of Parliament, and the, commentators, helpfully tell us that this is a joint sitting between the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, and we get to welcome the Speaker of Speaker of Parliament, and we welcome the Chair of the National Council of Provinces, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that exists. That exists." Doesn't really seem to do anything, but it exists. What it does is, on any legislation that affects the provinces, it has to consider the legislation. It can recommend, in fact, it can demand changes to the legislation. It can then either accept the legislation or it can throw the legislation back to the National Assembly. So it can block legislation that is passed by the National Assembly. If the National Assembly wishes to override such a block, they have to do so by a 2/3 majority, which is an extremely high hurdle. So, now you think, okay, well, what affects the provinces? That's actually a fairly long list. They can't, for example, affect the presidency. The president is elected by the National Assembly, and that's purely a National Assembly matter. They can't affect the budget, the national budget, because again, that's a Parliament matter and not a provincial matter. But they can affect anything that involves education, primary and secondary education, agriculture, consumer protection, disaster management, environmental matters, health services, housing, indigenous and customary law, industrial promotion, police to a limited extent, population development, public transport, tourism, trade, urban and rural development, and welfare services. And this is only half of the list of subjects on which the National Council of Provinces is empowered to veto or amend legislation.
Right.
So they actually have an enormous amount of power. They've been acting as a rubber stamp, obviously. If the cabinet is ANC controlled and the Parliament is ANC dominated, and the NCOP is ANC dominated, they're all just going to say, yes, boss, this is what we're going to do. What happens when the ANC loses its majority in Parliament, and let's assume that it does not get to lead a governing coalition, which I actually think is unlikely come 2024. But let's say a DA-led coalition takes over Parliament. The NCOP is constructed out of 90 members, 10 of which come from each province. So every province has an equal delegation going to the National Council of Provinces. That delegation is comprised proportionally, depending on the party representation in the provincial legislatures. Now, at the moment, the ANC controls an outright majority of 7 provinces. Right? It has a 5-member delegation in the Gauteng delegation. So 5 out of 10 of Gauteng's votes are ANC, and the only one where it has a minority is in the Western Cape, where it has only 3 members in the provincial delegation. Now, most of the votes in the NCOP happen per province, not per individual member. Right. So the fact that the ANC dominates 7 provinces and has an equal share in Gauteng gives it probably a minimum of 78% of the vote in the NCOP. It is much more dominant there than it is in Parliament. Now, there's some polling that the IRR has done, the Institute for Race Relations, and frankly, I don't think any of the polling that's being done in South Africa is very reliable for a number of reasons. And it's not that the pollsters are particularly bad; it's just the nature of polling and what people are going to say when you ask them certain questions. But it does suggest that there's a possibility that a number of the provinces could switch come 2024. Like it says that the country would probably switch. The ANC would go to 42% or something. Now that actually really needs to happen because it's a big move. It's a big change to get the ANC from what is it, about 65% of the members and 78% of the votes in the NCOP to below 50%.
Right.
If they don't do that, then the ANC is going to play spoiler. You know, on anything that affects the provinces, the ANC is going to be able to veto Parliament, and then force Parliament to adopt things with a 2/3 majority, which of course any new government coalition will never achieve. So it's a massive thing, and I've been surprised that political analysts and so on haven't really been talking much about it. I think the only one I saw in the last year that spoke about it was an article by Pierre de Vos.
So can I just, am I unmuted here? You know, one of the things that we often talk about also with you, Kanthan, here on the show is the business of politicking, which almost all our MPs are terrible at. And what you alluded to, Ivo, is the fact that going into the next 5-year term after the 2024 election is going to need astute politicians. You know, I watch a lot of the by-election numbers as well. Personally, I think the EFF have made a miscalculation by pulling out of their coalition agreement with the IFP, because there's a lot of by-elections that we're seeing in the KZN area, and almost all of them have the IFP trending up. So the likelihood that even in the 2024 election, the IFP's numbers are going to swing back quite drastically away from the ANC is also about, and you're talking about the switching just in that National Council of Provinces, the business of politicking, the business of walking the floor and whipping the votes, which is what Pemba Jodina should be doing for the ANC, which I don't believe that the DA is particularly good at, right? In kind of canvassing people across the floor from them to come onto their side when it comes to passing through legislation and pushing bills through. They're not particularly good at that. And that's also one of the reasons why when we look at the coalition structures in the municipalities, of the 8 metros where there were coalitions, you know, there are only 3 DA members left. There was one in Tshwane, there was one in Johannesburg, there was one in Cape Town, one in Nelson Mandela Bay, one in Ekurhuleni. There are only 3 left. There are only 3 left standing, right? Because they're not particularly good at whipping votes, at talking to their colleagues and moving them across the floor to their side for the greater good of everybody. And this is one of the reasons why I think a coalition government in South Africa is going to struggle terribly. And it is also the reason why, I'm sorry, Musi Maimane, the idea of changing the game and having individuals stand for the position of president will never work, you know, because the most important thing is being able to get the people around the table to the same place. And none of our guys are good at doing that.
Agreed.
I think there's a lot of discussion about that, though, about how the coalitions might work, and you know, and I agree with you. You know, I think it's going to be absolute chaos. I think it's going to be a very traumatic time, even under the best of scenarios. You know, and I think the best scenario is a DA-led coalition, despite all its flaws. But I think the national coalition government will be terrible. You know, I think a lot of the small parties will have the power to basically bring down the president at any time they choose. Which you know, there's going to be no stability in government for a long time to come if that happens. But I think that's separate. But Ivo, that's the one issue that's being discussed.
Ivo,
and what's not discussed.
Look at the plus side.
Kanthan is our silver lining man this morning.
Yeah, on the plus side, Ivo, if it's going to be total chaos, they're not going to be able to pass a budget and steal money.
I agree.
That's fantastic.
I agree. I'm an old school libertarian, and I believe not in an efficient government. I believe in an inefficient government. The less government is able to do, the less they are able to infringe on our rights to do things for ourselves.
Wow. Okay. Well, we seem to be becoming full circle on this stuff, because I can remember a conversation with the four of us, actually, not so long ago, on whether or not electricity was going to be the final tripwire. But ironically, the wire has been stolen by cable thieves. Guys, let's move on to some international stuff, because there's quite a lot to talk about in the international sphere. I don't know if you've seen, but there's been quite a lot of noise about January the 6th, which we were told in America was the insurrection. There were congressional hearings held, there were investigations done. Some people are languishing in prison as we speak because they were unable to make a difference, to do their thing, to actually effect change the way that they wanted to. Now, suddenly, there's a whole lot of footage turning up, which Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the House, has given to Fox News, which is making it patently evident to anyone who has eyes that this is less insurrection and more kind of guided tour / bunch of droogs who walked into a government building and got very little done other than, I don't know, stealing Nancy Pelosi's lectern. This was never going to overturn democracy. Why was it so hyperinflated by the Democrats at the time?
Do you want me to have a go at that?
You can.
All right.
I mean,
go for it.
All right,
I threw a line into the water and no one's biting.
I've spoken on this many times, so I'd rather hear Ivo on it. Yeah.
I do consider it an insurrection, and I think minimizing it is a mistake. There was a significant amount of violence, and and the whole thing was unauthorized. You don't waltz into Congress and physically try to block Congress from effectively rubber stamping the results of an election. That is insurrection. The footage that Tucker Carlson got, it is interesting in the sense that it gives this QAnon shaman dude some very interesting footage to show in court to argue that he may not have been aware that what he was doing was trespassing and so on. But the reality is that those police officers that escorted him in and led him all the way to the Congress, to the doors of the Congress chambers, they were all fired for misconduct. Right, so they weren't doing they weren't right in what they were doing. They were wrong, and they were disciplined over it. Frankly, I think that there should be similar criminal charges levied against them for allowing people unauthorized access to Congress and allowing people to go threaten Congress critters. So I'm not sure that what Tucker Carlson has is quite as powerful as he makes it out to be. It is useful to the QAnon shaman in his court case, certainly. I think it will certainly lead to mitigation of sentence in his case. But I don't think it fundamentally changes what that day was all about, and that it was not sightseeing. This was not just people wandering around Congress, just as if they were allowed to be there. They weren't. They were there to be disruptive. Some of them were violent. It really was an attack on the seat of U.S. government. The whole notion that you can just stop a Congress from certifying an election, I think that in itself is a seditious notion.
All right. That's very different opinion to Kanthan's from just a couple of days ago when we spoke about this stuff. So, all right.
No. Look, certainly in terms of remember the key issue in terms of June 6th. By the way, I agree with the broad brushstrokes of what Ivo was just talking about. Because, should anyone be allowed to charge the Houses of Parliament? It's kind of like the EFF trying to charge the stage when Ramaphosa is delivering his sona. It's certainly not a peaceful protest, and it's I think that kind of stuff has no place in a democracy any more than But you see, the question of June 6th is not whether the stuff that they did was peaceful protest or not. The heart of it is whether it was instigated by Donald J. Trump. That is the heart of it. And ultimately, this is not about trying to go after the people who actually caused the cuck on June 6th, because they did cause cuck on June 6th. This is about trying to find a backdoor way of preventing Donald Trump from running in the next election. Simply. And, every time we start focusing on what actually happened behind the scenes, the question really is, was this something that was directed by Donald Trump or was it not? You see, in other words, was there culpability on the part of Donald Trump? And that, for me, is the key issue. I don't believe there was culpability on the part of Trump in this. In fact, all of the sound bites that we've seen, the tweets that we saw from Trump said, peaceful stuff only, no violence, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I think we're getting too caught up right now.
I think that's a bit. I think that's a bit naive and a bit disingenuous. Of course, even Trump isn't stupid enough to call for violence on Twitter. But when he said, and I don't have the quotes in front of me, but the way he told people to come to the Capitol and to fight this, that implicitly is an invitation for unspecified trouble. He might have plausible deniability in a court of law, but I think his intent was pretty clear.
Well, wait. Ivo, are you suggesting that we should bypass rule of law and that we should, in fact, prosecute based on interpretation of intent?
We'll let a court decide whether it actually constitutes incitement to violence, whether it actually constitutes incitement to insurrection, or not court, but a Congress, because the president, and I think a former president, can only be tried in Congress, isn't it true?
A former president can only be tried in Congress. I don't believe that is in fact the case, because you can't be charged.
No, a sitting president can only be tried in. No, a sitting
president can be tried by Congress. Yes.
Okay, so he'll end up facing the Supreme Court, no doubt.
Yeah, but a former
Joe
president.
Joe Biden is the sitting president. He's sitting because he can't stand up for too long, and I don't think he has. The only thing he has to try for, he doesn't have to be tried, but the only thing he has to try for is to pee without it burning.
Look, guys, the interesting thing that's going on right now, if you look at the discussion that took place between Ted Cruz and Merrick Garland over the past days.
That was interesting.
And it was very interesting, because Cruz was basically saying to Merrick Garland, the reason why you went after the question of the documents at Mar-a-Lago was you were trying to build a case. And it was a political case, and that's the reason why information was leaked from within your department in terms of what was going to be happening. But no such leaks happened in the case of Joe Biden. And, is there in fact a politically motivated series of leaks? And Garland's plausible deniability response again, Ivo, is, I condemn all leaks and I'm not responsible for them. And that's okay. Because plausible deniability is the cornerstone of politics.
I mean, I sometimes wish that people paid attention, like Phumi does, to our judicial appointments, because, when the JSC comes together, you've got all these people from the various parties and they all talk to judges. And I remember there was a fair amount of interest last year when we were choosing our Chief Justice. And I wish that we paid as much attention as America do. They obviously broadcast on C-SPAN the judicial appointments that Congress has to make to judges all over the country for circuit courts and appeal courts and so on. And there have been some amazing exchanges between people who are standing for positions in the judiciary and them being grilled by the members of Congress. It makes me think that even though America's system is full of massive holes and there are big problems there, that there are certain things that are still happening. Like, you see these people being questioned. You see them having to stand and give answers for things that they've said and done before. And I love seeing that accountability, even if it is just for show, because we don't know, sometimes the party just votes someone in anyway. But it's nice to see that stuff, and I kind of miss it here.
Well, this comes back to the question right now in terms of who actually controls the Senate. And it's a very different scenario going back to as recently as the Obama era, where there actually was behind the scenes discussion that would take place across both sides of the political divide. There would be negotiations, and effectively it was, up until that stage, a reasonably functional system in terms of how these appointments were effected. So the first time it went toes up was at the point at which Obama was not allowed to put forward a nominee for the Supreme Court. In fact, it was the very same Merrick Garland. And in hindsight, seeing the way Garland has conducted himself over the past period, the guy is a turd royale. But having said that, it was fundamentally wrong for a Republican-controlled Senate to not allow a nominee to be put forward for the position of Supreme Court Justice. That was the point, to my mind, at which the U.S. system actually fell apart. It's now a pale shadow of its former self. I think that the ability to have those discussions that actually allow for compromise on bills before they get put forward result in the divisive politics that you've got right now.
I tend to agree.
The Roe versus Wade thing is a good example, just to kind of crystallize this. You had a situation where you had Democratic president, Democratic House, Democratic Senate, and they could have codified Roe versus Wade before it actually ended up being, summarily ejected by the Supreme Court. Why did they not do it? Well, it's because they were very clear that this was a wedge issue in terms of the coming elections. And it was better to have it there as a divisive wedge rather than actually trying to keep the country working. So, Gareth, I think that, yes, it's kind of like our Constitution. It's great, but it was designed with Mandela in mind. And, you should design things with your worst enemy actually implementing the laws. Ivo,
I just want to say, Kanthan, one of the things that you allude to is interesting, because we were talking about that with the NCOP, is the fact that what they are also able to do effectively in the States is they're able to whip the votes. They're able to go and talk to each individual and get them on side or not for whatever they're trying to push through on both sides, right? And
no, Phumi, I'm saying that's no longer the case.
That's so. You and I are in agreement that one of the things that has happened, similar to we said, is the blocks of voting, and people are now, and interestingly, I wanted to bring this up. What we saw happening on Monday in the council, or rather in Action SA in Tshwane, with them wanting to put their councillors to lie detectors so that they can figure out who did not block vote with them, for the mayor. And those are the things that break the way the system is supposed to work. And down the line, it's got consequences down the line as well. Ivo, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kanthan. I don't think the US system is working as well as intended. One of the things that bothers me, for example, was the questioning of judges, is they don't ask judges about their judicial philosophy or their position on the Constitution, or things that to me would seem relevant. It's all about hot button political issues. Where do you stand on transsexuals? Where do you stand on dinosaurs living at the same time as people? Should we teach our children evolution, or is that going to turn them into Satanists? It's all of these crappy, bloody partisan, batshit issues that they get tested on. And abortion. It shouldn't matter what a judge's opinion about abortion is. What should matter is how well their decision would be grounded in law, and that goes back to their history, in terms of how they've applied the law in the past and their philosophy of how they would apply the law. Do they believe in states' rights, etc.
It's been
I just don't think it's serious anymore.
Yeah, I think that's probably true for a lot in politics. There's so much this performative now. So, Ivo, couple of things, because we haven't had you on for a while. People thought that we'd had some kind of disagreement with you and that we hadn't invited you, but I promise there was no such thing. But you're here now, and you want, one of the other things you want to address is the move against objectivity in journalism. Now, this is particular to your area of interest, but I think a lot of us will be pulled into this because we're sick to death of seeing media publications being used for political narratives and agendas, and we're not sure who to believe anymore. And it's an ongoing discussion since the world of fake news opened up so long ago. Let's hear your thoughts on this, and let's hear why we should all be worried about it.
Well, there was a Washington Post article written by a guy called Leonard Downey, and he's a former executive editor of the Post and a professor at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University. So he is himself a fairly senior figure. But it wasn't just an opinion article. He actually went out and interviewed 75 or so people in the media, at all levels of the media, to discover the values and practices in mainstream newsrooms today. And he said that what we found has convinced us that truth-seeking news media must move beyond whatever objectivity once meant to produce what he calls more trustworthy views, and talks about a generational shift in American journalism. And basically, they argue that young journalists think that they got it all wrong, that objectivity is really a way of dressing up the stale status quo opinions of an establishment, that establishment being, probably majority older, white, male, etc. And that it ignores a lot of alternative viewpoints and alternative lived experiences. Now, of course, the whole thing comes out of the woke movement, the critical theory movement, that elevates subjective experiences, lived experiences, above, annoying things like objective facts. And this is, I'm sure you've had a lot to say about critical theory in the past. And to me, this is a real problem, though. I mean, I agree that a lot of viewpoints have been excluded in the media and don't get enough coverage. And I absolutely welcome reading more about those views and reading more from those writers. I think it's important that we do get a very wide variety of views. But to say that you want to throw out objectivity, I think throws the baby out with the bathwater. Now, look, I'm an opinion writer, right? So maybe it's a bit ironic for me to be all up in arms about this. Because I write my subjective opinion on things. But my subjective opinion must be grounded in fact. I rely heavily on news reporters that give me both sides of the story, that give me what I believe to be an objective take on what actually happened. I wasn't always there. I wasn't there to interview the people. I expect news reporters to give me an objective report on that, so I know what's going on. When I take a position, I want to know that I've heard all sides of the story, and that when I dismiss an opinion, I've done so only once I've understood the opinion that I dismiss, and I've understood the people whose opinion I dismiss.
It sounds like a lot of work
to me,
for many journalists these days, though. That sounds like far too much work.
I think for a lot of journalists it probably is too much work, but I'm a bit old school that way, I suppose. I like to be able to point to research, and this research consists of scientific papers and so on, but it also consists of actual news reporting.
What do we think of this? I mean, Phumi, Kanthan, what do you say to what Ivo's just brought up here from that article?
Look, my personal track record, remember I went back to ENCA with a view to getting the audience figures back up to above 50% of market share because they had fallen to below 30% of market share. And I was given a year to do it, and I did it in 3 months. And how did I do it? It's very simple. You push relentlessly the concept of accuracy, objectivity, and fairness, and you strip out the adjectives. And it really is as simple as that, because people will actually be able to tell when you are trying to get them to swallow a particular line.
But it also got you fired.
Well, it also got me a year's paid holiday. So, guys, let's not forget that.
But
in the middle of COVID.
I thought it was interesting that the author of the article, Downey, he's at one point in that article he said he never understood quite what objectivity meant. And he didn't consider it a standard for the newsroom. He said, my goals for our journalism were instead accuracy, fairness, non-partisanship, accountability, and the pursuit of truth. Well, fine. If you don't know what objectivity means, then I can go with those, those criteria: accuracy, fairness, partisanship, etc. So the power just went off here. So my UPS just complained.
Okay, so it was your UPS. I wondered what the beeping was. Pums, you get to have something to say.
The minute you make a cut,
I can live with that. But the thing is, what he's describing there is objectivity, or at least striving for objectivity. I mean,
Phumi, go ahead.
The minute you make a cut, the minute you make a decision that this is what we put on, because news or reporting is not a data dump. You have to have a point of view, and that point of view is informed by all sorts of things, right? So the minute you make a cut, the minute you decide this part of what this person is saying instead of that part or the whole of what this person is saying, that makes it. And is it less accurate? The fact that you've left out half the sentence, is it less accurate? It's making a decision. I don't know if that decision.
I agree with you. I agree.
That speaks to fairness, and I just want to say, and the question of fairness for me is at the point at which you choose to omit particular facts in order to skew the story makes it patently unfair, and that's really an objective test. If you are leaving it out because it's irrelevant, that's one thing. If you're leaving it out because you're trying to push an agenda, it's different. And when I teach journalists this stuff to this day, my line is very simple: accuracy, get the facts right; objectivity, don't take sides; fairness, don't bring stuff into the conversation that's meant to skew the story in a particular direction. The stuff is not rocket science.
No.
And it actually works. But just one last thing, guys.
I accept that. Sorry, I accept that no individual journalists can be expected to reach pure objectivity. It doesn't exist. But if one journalist leaves out a certain section, that actually twists the meaning of what happened or twists the truth, then another journalist won't. And if I then read 3 or 4 reports, I'll get a good picture.
Honourable members, on a point of order, I know you've got more to get off your chest. Kanthan, last word, and then I've got to give the poll results because we've got to know who.
My last word is I want to send a shout out to Helen Ziller. It's her birthday today. Happy birthday, Helen! Oh. I want to send a shout out to Duncan McLeod.
It's also his birthday. Yes.
Tech Central. It's also his birthday. Happy birthday!
I believe he's turning 50 today.
He is turning 50 today, indeed. Yeah. So
can't believe you wasted our time with other people's birthdays.
With balloons on the timeline.
All right.
What's the poll results?
Here are the results, ladies and gentlemen. You've been waiting all morning. The final poll is our favorite new minister of Cyril's cabinet is A, the Minister of Electricity, Sputla. Only 9% of the vote went to Sputla. 4% right at the bottom of the pile to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma for ladies, kids, and cripples. I'm in for more ministers than that. People who wanted an even bigger cabinet, 6%. And that means 81%, I'm afraid, not impressed at all with Cyril's new cabinet. Oh, no. Poor Cyril. Back to the drawing board. Thanks, everybody. That is the Burning Platform for today. We will see you next week. Same time, same place. Thank you, Ivo. Thank you, Kanthan. Thank you, Phumi. And most especially, thank you to you. Cheers, everybody. Have a very good Thursday. Bye-bye.